Hey guys, and welcome back to the Fantasy Football Profits. Today we're going to go over our top 24 tight end rankings. We're going through all the guys all at once. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be lots of fun. As always, you don't have to watch the whole video. We would encourage you to, but there will be timestamps down in the description below so you can see our rankings. And then, of course, you can click around and get straight to the players that you want to hear about. Hopefully that'll save you guys some time and really help give you guys an edge. If you want even more of an edge in your fantasy league, make sure to sign up for our premium stats package. Then you can go to our website and check out updated stats every week throughout the season, metrics and information that you just don't get anywhere else and that you can't find if you're on ESPN or wherever it would be. So I think it's absolutely worth it. It's just $5 a month. Make sure to check that out if you guys want just a little bit more to help you out this year in fantasy. But we got a lot of things to cover this video and a little bit of news. One thing we just want to say thank you to Chris Bow. We got your message. Hope you like your shirt. He was in our playoff contest and won a t-shirt because he finished, I believe, in the top 10 or whatever. Did really well. It was lots of fun. And then Jason Harris, thank you guys for signing up for our Patreon. He's our most recent Patreon sub. Hopefully you like everything we're doing there for you, and hopefully you love our premium stat package. But let's move on. Rob, do you have anything to say before we continue?
No, I think we'll just get into the video and we'll talk about some of these things. We'll sprinkle in throughout the video, things that we think you need to know regarding drafting a tight end and kind of where our philosophies are.
Absolutely. We're going to cover the research on these guys and the philosophy. The last thing being, guys, we've got spots open in our community leagues. All you have to do is say, hey, I want to be in the league, and drop your email down in the comments below. You can also message us on our website or through our Instagram. But anyways, that's all we really got to say on that. Let's move on and get to our number one guy.
So the number one guy we have here is Travis Kelce. Really the only tight ends I would even think about putting ahead of him was be maybe, in our humble opinion, George Kittle or Zach Ertz, right? But I think they both have more question marks than Kelce. Let's look at Ertz. Ertz has some competition with Dallas Goadert. We'll get to that later on in the video. Last year his targets were insanely high and they're going to go down. Coaches have already said that Dallas is going to have an increased role there. And then they're going to have a greater focus on the running game with Howard and Sanders. That means less targets for Ertz. Then you look at Kittle. Kittle's a stud. We love this guy. In fact, we talked highly of him in last preseason, so we weren't surprised he went out and did what he did. He's fun to watch, but there's question marks at quarterback, and his body of work is smaller than the other two guys mentioned there. So that leaves stud tight end Kelce as our number one guy there. He's become a very reliable weapon, right? So last season was his fifth in the NFL there, and every season he's seen a statistical increase in terms of his catches. You look at his catches per game, right? As a rookie, it was 4.2, went up to 4.5, then 5.3 to 5.5. Then last year, he crushed with 6.4 catches per game. He's an extremely reliable target, and he's the Chiefs' most reliable weapon. Really, when it comes down to it, we look at Patrick Mahomes, and he's trying to find that guy, pressure, first down, whatever. He turns to Travis Kelce. He broke Gronkowski's receiving record last year of 1,327 receiving yards. He broke it with 1,333 receiving yards. Unfortunately, later that same day, George Kittle broke that record. But once again, a great season there. And we predicted it last year in the preseason. We said he's going to finally end up double-digit touchdowns, which he did last year. He ended up with, I believe it was 10 for the season. So very good numbers there. He's going to be 29 this fall, and I think for a tight end who's never missed an NFL game due to injuries, I think he's got to have at least 4 to 5 good years ahead of him there. He's playing in a good offense, a great scheme with a great quarterback. He's the best tight end in football right now. He's certainly the safest pick out there as far as tight ends go. He was voted by NFL head coaches and some executives as the best tight end in the NFL, which I love that. You love when his peers, those are very close to him, really affirm what we think we see statistically. He had 3 consecutive years over 1,000 receiving yards. And last year's was really one for the ages. He goes out, he has 100 catches, 10 touchdowns, and 1,300 receiving yards. His 103 catches last year left him third for most catches by a tight end in a season. Last year, he was third most red zone targets among tight ends, wide receivers, and running backs behind only Devontae Adams and Michael Thomas. He had 30 red zone targets. So for him, that double-digit touchdowns last year, I don't think it was a fluke. I think he could easily hit that number again. In fact, I think he'd get close, 12, 13, maybe even 14 this year. Pro Football Focus had him ranked as number 2 tight end last year behind Kittle. His yards per route of 2.31 was also second in the NFL among tight ends. If you're in a 12-team league where you have to start a tight end, you should be taking this guy in a mid to late second round because there's such a fall off in that position. For me, I'm not a big tight end guy, but I'm in a few leagues where you have to have him. So for me, I'm going to lock up one of those top 5 guys. Otherwise, I'm not going to bother at all, and I'll just do a a plug-and play on some guys. In fact, you did a matrix on the breakdown there and the fall off on that position-wise statistically.
Yeah, so what we found in 2017, I haven't really had a chance to look at all the numbers exactly for 2018, but this is a trend that has followed 2015, 2016, and 2017. What we found was that the number one tight end in 2017, or whatever happened to be, Travis Kelce, it is far and away the best tight end among everyone else. In fact, we looked at him at number 1 compared to the number 6. He was getting about twice as many fantasy points. He was doubling their fantasy value. And that's why we've always preached a philosophy of just like, if you really should be taking a tight end in the first couple of rounds, Travis Kelce is worth a second round pick. And I don't think a lot of people recognize that. All right, guys, so here we've got George Kittle at number 2. Here's the thing, he absolutely came on the scene last season. He just shocked some people. He was a real surprise. And one of the things I wanted to say was that was not a fluke last season. I think that may be a concern for some people. Does he regress? Yeah, he's a good tight end, they'll say, but is he really the number 2 or number 1 tight end up in that range? I'm going to say yes. I'm going to tell you why. The first reason why is we're going to get into the metrics, but we're going to wait on that. And the first reason I want to talk about is this wasn't nearly as big of a surprise to us as it was to most people. I don't mean to kind of toot our own horn a little bit, but we kind of sort of saw this coming. Maybe not to this extent, but we knew he had potential. I want to read to you guys our notes on George Kittle before last season started, before anyone knew what kind of tight end he was going to be. Here's kind of what we came out and what we wrote about him and what we said. Said Kittle had a very good rookie campaign and ended with 43 catches and 515 yards. The coaches were big on this kid from the beginning of camp, which led to them actually trading Vance McDonald, after which George took over as the number 1 tight end. All of his workouts and his metrics are stunning. He has the skill to excel in this league. It is, where was I at there? It's important to remember he looked good and put up good numbers with below average quarterbacks much of the season this year. Should be much of an upgrade with Jimmy Garoppolo throwing him the ball. Funny thing was Jimmy Garoppolo wasn't throwing him the ball and he still looked much improved. And so that's the first thing I want to say. I think we were sort of on that. We love this guy. The only reason he comes in at number 2 is, like you said, Travis Kelce. He's got probably the best quarterback in the league. I almost don't think you can argue. He threw 50 touchdowns last year. That's just so much touchdowns for Kelce to go out there and get, and his quarterback situation just can't compete. But other than that, the metrics are way up there. 88 receptions, 5 touchdowns. But here's what I really want to note. Some metrics that, not all of us have time to really take a second to break down a little bit more in-depth one. 15.6 yards per catch, 10.7 yards per target. He had 873 yards after the catch. That's 9.9 average yards after the catch, a whole 1.2 yards better than the next best guy. He also had a NFL record for receiving yards at the tight end position and 2.83 yards per route run. Those were all best at the tight end position, ahead of Travis Kelce, ahead of Zach Ertz, ahead of Evan Engram, far and away above everybody else. His metrics per whatever, per target, per catch, per anything, they were just up there. I don't know what he did, how he was able to do it, but he managed to have more yards than Kelce, even though he actually had less targets than Kelce. The numbers are there. We just want to see a little bit better quarterback situation before we could put him ahead of Kelce. But he's elite. This guy is absolutely insane. I love this guy. It's a lot of fun to watch him kind of Iowa and really just be a star.
Yeah, you got hot last season. I'm in a league where you have to start a tight end. It's a dynasty league, and I tried to make a move for this guy. If you're in a dynasty league and you've got him, you got to feel great. This guy is going to have some phenomenal years ahead of him there. So,
funny thing, guys, I want to drop a comment if you're in a league like this. We're in a league where it's always a tight end or a receiver. We start 3 tight end or receiver mixes, and one team has both Kelce and Kittle. Did you know that?
Yeah, that's crazy.
I don't understand how that happened, but that's crazy.
All right, let's get to number 3 guy. Zach Ertz. So heading into 2018, the last 3 years prior to that, he'd average 831 receiving yards and 76 catches. Those are very good numbers, especially when you consider the fact that he on average was, really only playing in 14 games during that stretch. So heading into 2018, our preseason rankings, we said he's had 4 consecutive seasons where he's increased his yards per game, and we went on to say last year this should be the 5th year in a row that he does that. Well, he went on and did exactly that. He ended with 1,164 receiving yards, finally breaking 1,000 receiving yards, that plateau, which is a nice number to hit there. He set a record with the most catches in any season by a tight end with 116. Zach Ertz was 7th in the NFL in red zone targets. He was 4th in yards per route among tight ends. And he's seen a constant rise in his reception rate since he entered the league as a rookie. His targets last year and his receptions obviously were very high. I don't think he's going to repeat those numbers again, but I also don't think they were a fluke either. He missed 2 games in 2016 and 17, but if you look at his catches per game, that rate, had he played, he would end up with 89 catches and 84 catches. So that shows us what happened last year. It wasn't an anomaly per se. This guy gobbles up targets, and this offense, they love to feed their tight ends. In the last 4 seasons, he's averaged 8.2 targets per game. That's excellent. Last season was 9.75. That's an amazing number there for a tight end. Last season was 6th in the NFL. It was his 6th season in the NFL, and that's really actually one more than Travis Kelce. Been in the league 6 years, and yet he's younger, about a year and a half younger than Travis Kelce at 28. So he's still young. This guy's got many good years ahead of him, playing in a good offense with a good quarterback that looks like he's healthy. Looks like Carson Wentz going to be ready week 1 there. I think that's important. I think he's stud. I think he can dominate for many years ahead of them. If there is a downside for him, it's Dallas Goadert. Dallas Goadert actually has shown at times this guy has the potential, and he's got the skill set to be the #1 tight end there. So I do see a slight regression, Zach Ertz, from his stats last year, but this guy's really good. In fact, speaking of regression, look at Zach Rosenblatt, who follows the team closely, says Zach Ertz's targets will go down in 2019. They're talking about increasing Dallas Goadert's role, the running game, things like that. So I think his targets go down. He saw 156 last year. That's the most ever since they recorded targets, most ever by that position. With all that said, this guy is a very solid play, a very solid pick for you. But for me, where he's at, for me, he's more of a later 3rd round pick than I would say 2nd or early 3rd, just because I do think he's going to regress a little bit, but he's still very good. Any thoughts?
No, I completely agree. This is a situation where this guy's got all the talent in the world, but there's definitely some competition there. Even with Rob Gronkowski, when Aaron Hernandez was there, Rob Gronkowski was held back. So we've seen this before where 2 tight ends in the same offense can be pretty good, but they can't quite be that elite, that #1. He definitely comes in here at this tier because I love that offense. I think it's a high-powered offense, and they're still going to lean on Kittle, I think, especially in the red zone, but maybe just a little bit of a ceiling there because I like Dallas Goadert. I'm very curious to see what happens when they are both able to be in different offenses and both start. All right, guys, so here we have Evan Engram, and the first thing I have to say is I am just kind of appalled how little attention this guy is getting. I was telling him I want to do a video, and I just want to talk about overshadowed fantasy players, where there's all these big news on other guys and certain players just aren't being looked at. Evan Engram is one of them. I don't know why, I don't know for what reason, but he's just not being looked at. Not only did he have a good season last year, he had a great season when you consider what he did without Odell Beckham. Guys, I'm not going to waste your time saying he had this many catches, this many yards. I want to skip that. Let's get to the good stuff. What did he do in his last 4 games of the season? Those 4 games he played without Odell Beckham Jr. All right, so in those 4 games, he had 22 catches on 31 targets, 320 yards, a touchdown, and he actually got 15 first downs. We'll get to that later. Those 4 games over a 16-game pace or a full season is 88 catches off of 124 targets, just shy of 1,300 yards and 4 touchdowns with 60 first down catches. Those numbers are insane and come off of a solid 14.5 yards per catch. He's shown us that he can produce without Odell Beckham Jr. And in fact, furthermore, not only can he produce, he has shown us that when Odell Beckham is not there, he is the '1 target in that offense ahead of Sterling Shepard, the wide receiver. And he's able to do that for a few reasons. He is so talented and so athletic. At 6'3", 240 pounds, he is slightly small for a tight end, but he's also slightly fast. This guy is pretty much a hybrid between a wideout and a tight end, and that is absolutely perfect for an offense that's going to need to be able to use him in a lot of different situations. And so I think that's absolutely huge. It's also important to note we always get pushback. That 4-game stretch, he played against Dallas, Indianapolis, Tennessee, and Washington. Dallas, Tennessee, and Washington were all top 3 defenses in the NFL, and Indianapolis was getting hot at that point. If you go back to last season and check out some of the defensive metrics and how that was going. So he did not have an easy schedule either. I don't think that number was skewed at all. I don't think he's quite going to go out and have 1,300 receiving yards because I think he's going to have a great first half of the season. Maybe defenses catch on a little bit and his numbers slightly regress. But this guy's going to have a phenomenal year this year. I'm very excited to see what they can do, especially when they figure out that quarterback position. Evan Engram, guys, he deserves this #4 spot, to me, hands down.
Yeah, I think this guy is so overlooked. He's got such a high ceiling. There's so much potential there, really. I don't know why he's not getting more props from people. The one thing I like about it, though, is Saquon Barkley. How do you match up this guy? A linebacker, safety, a corner? If you double him up, bring somebody a little bit big over, maybe to handle his size. Once again, you said he's got the speed. You line a corner up, and if you do that, what about Saquon Barkley? The year that Saquon Barkley had last year, he's going to get a lot of attention. So I think Evan Engram's still going to see a lot of single coverage out there. I think that he's being overlooked. This guy has got so much potential. So don't sleep on him, whatever you do. So I want to talk about O.J. Howard. He's another guy with a lot of potential and a very high ceiling. Pro Football Focus rated him last year as number 3 tight end among all tight ends. They take a lot of things into account when they look at that. We should actually probably break that down. We refer to Pro Football Focus quite often, but there's a lot that goes into how they rate that. We should actually break that down at some point. Former first-round pick. This guy's got all the tools to dominate. He's got great body size. In fact, if you look at his body type and his size and his plays, very reminiscent of Antonio Gates. If you know anything about Antonio Gates, Hall of Famer, had a great career. He's very similar as far as how he plays the game. In his second season there, compared to his rookie season, he had more catches and touchdowns, yet he played 4 less games. Before getting hurt, he really started to hit his stride there. He was really coming together, building rapport, starting to learn the game. And during 7 of the last 9 games, his per-game average was 4.4 catches, 71 yards, and 0.7 touchdowns. You project that out over 16 games, that would have been a very good 70 catches, 1,136 yards, and 11 TDs. That's not a fluke. This guy was brought in. There's a reason why he was a first-round pick. He's got a lot of talent there. I love he's playing on a team with a bad defense. Tampa Bay might make some improvements defensively, but they're going to be in the bottom third in the NFL, which means they're going to have to score a lot of points, throw the ball a lot to stay in games. That's good. Another thing I like is that team lost Jackson and Humphreys, wide receivers. Those targets are going to go somewhere, and some of those targets are going to go to O.J. Howard. Another thing, Winston. Right now he's getting rave reviews from the coach. Winston, former first-round, first overall pick, has got a lot of tools there. He just needs to bring it together. But right now it's looking like Winston's finally getting it all together, and he's got the potential to be a great quarterback there. I think that Howard actually has tight end 1 potential and could easily end up in top 5 in scoring. I like O.J. Howard once again. Great tight end there. Another guy that I think is being a little bit overlooked, not nearly as much as Evan Engram, but I think that people underestimate how talented this guy is. Anything you want to add to that?
There's so much to add. We could talk about this guy for a half an hour on his own, honestly. The numbers are there. The stats were already there. But then you take into account he's going to have, 1 quarterback the whole season. It's nice to have that consistency. You get Bruce Arians coming in as the coach. Bruce Arians coached Arizona when Carson Palmer threw for 35 touchdown passes, and they were actually a really good offense. I love Bruce Arians. I think he's an underrated coach. And then, of course, you talk about the 2 wide receivers, Jackson and Humphreys, who both left. That's going to leave a lot of targets and a lot for O.J. Howard to be able to capitalize on, and I think that he absolutely will. This is another one of those picks where it's like, why aren't people paying attention to him? Everything points towards a breakout season. All right, guys, here we have Hunter Henry seemingly back from the dead. It looked like his career had pretty much ended with injuries, and he disappeared. We always talk about one thing we always get frustrated here at the FFP is that a player will get forgotten so quickly, that fantasy owners are just looking for the next hot new title or whatever, the next guy to come out and star. And Henry's one of those guys who was one of those guys, and now he's sort of being forgotten, sort of being underlooked a little bit. I love this guy. He's still only 24 years old. He is still young, guys, and so he's got a future. He's still developing. I love a lot about him. I want to read some stats from 2017 for you. So in 12 games in 2017, he had 45 catches, 579 yards, and 4 touchdowns. That projects to 60 catches, 770 yards on 12.9 yards per catch, and 5.3 touchdowns, and actually 43 touchdown catches. So he had a great year that year. He played really well. You have to remember those numbers would have been even better. He was still the backup to Antonio Gates then at the time. So that's even more shocking. It's not very often that we're able to see 2 tight end systems that really thrive like that. But again, you continue to look at that number. This guy has 12 touchdowns in 27 career games. That breaks down to 7 touchdowns over a 16-game season. That's his pace. I absolutely love this. I mean, he's got a good quarterback in Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers, who is just known, spent his whole career throwing to tight ends. So I think you really have the benefit of Hunter Henry being at a position where you know Phillip Rivers is going to get him the ball. Tyrell Williams leaves. That's a lot of targets. I believe that was 5 touchdowns he had that's gone now, that needs to be replaced. Antonio Gates is gone. And the Melvin Gordon issues too as well. I think there's a lot going on here where it's like, hey, there's just so many pieces almost seemingly falling apart for San Diego right now, and he's the one piece that's falling into place. I don't think his number is going to be absolutely insane, but guys, he's going to get a lot of targets. I really think so. And then, of course, being that there's Mike Williams and Keenan Allen, I don't imagine he's going to see too much attention from defenses, so he does benefit from that. But again, he's still so young. Do not overlook this guy.
Yeah, everything's trending upwards for this guy right now. You talked about Melvin Gordon holding out. At first, we thought he'd report, but that situation is looking more and more now that it could extend into the regular season. The other thing out there is we like Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen's had a history of injury problems. Last 2 years, he's been pretty healthy, but now he's going to miss the rest of the preseason with an ankle injury. So you're just starting to see, like, okay, these targets got to go somewhere, and I could see him getting more targets. You know, like I said, I think he's got a very safe floor. I'm not sure how high his ceiling is, but I could definitely see this guy going 75 catches, 900 yards, and 7 to 8 touchdowns, which isn't spectacular, but that's a very, very good year for a tight end. So
especially when you look at the drop-off of when tight ends are being drafted. A guy like Kelce's taken in the second round, but once you get to that tight end 6 or 7, you can wait until round 8, round 9, round 10 to take your tight end. And if you could take him in round 8 and get that sort of production, that's a huge value pick.
Jared Cook going to New Orleans. Boy, his stock went through the roof when he went there. Anybody remember Jimmy Graham's numbers when he played with Drew Brees? That guy was lights out, phenomenal numbers. It was either him or Gronk who went back and forth. He was the best tight end in football as far as fantasy goes. How is he going to do? Is he going to be a good fit? Just because he brought him in doesn't mean he's going to be a good fit in that offense. Well, I'll say this. Saints tight ends coach Dan Campbell said it's pretty easy to see the impact Jared Cook has had during training camp. Campbell isn't the only one who's been impressed by Cook, as team reporter Mike Triplett of ESPN notes that the 32-year-old has quickly emerged as the go-to pass catcher for Drew Brees while turning heads with his size, athleticism, and versatility. He went on to say it's impossible to ignore Cook's performance at Cap, which has included a dazzling array of big plays and constant catches. Once again, he's come right in, looks like he's plugging that offense. Drew Brees is comfortable with him, he trusts him. Now at 32 years old, he's not young anymore, but he's very solid. He's playing for a Saints team that has been struggling to replace Jimmy Graham when he left. They brought in Cody Fleener and some other guys like that to replace, and it didn't really work out. I think they finally found their tight end replacement. It's going to be very good this year. 2018 was his best statistical season, best in terms of catches, yards, and touchdowns. Last year, his 4th best among tight ends, according to Pro Football Focus's ratings. Now, if you look at his career, he's been what I would call a slightly above average tight end, but not great. So why not better? Or a better question is, why did last year he have his best year? Why did it take so long? Why not sooner? Well, if you actually look at his career and who he's played for, he's played with a lot of quarterbacks that are below average and a lot of offense that are below average. Played for the Rams, and that was before McVay took over. He looked at some other teams he played for. So he has never been in an ideal situation like he's in right now with a great offense and a great quarterback. I think this guy could thrive for 2 or 3 years, especially Drew Brees throwing him the ball. I like Jared Cook. What a nice play. Once again, I think you're right. People like the sexy new names, the young tight ends. He's going to be overlooked. He's a guy that could slip, and you could grab this guy and feel very comfortable with him for the whole season. Anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that's just a perfect situation for him to land in. I was really concerned when he left Oakland after having such a good season, but this might even be an upgrade. It's certainly an upgrade as far as quarterback throwing him the ball, and so you got to love. I'm expecting kind of big touchdown production from him. I think with all the other weapons there, Kamara and Thomas, I don't think he's going to go over 1,000 yards receiving. I think there's almost no way, but I do think he'll have a really high touchdown percentage compared to his yards and compared to his catches, simply because that's just probably the most high-octane, high-powered offense in the NFL, and I love that situation.
Yeah, I think it's going to, like you said, it's going to be hard there. There's a lot of targets going to Kamara and Thomas. But the one thing that's going to help is the departure of we call it Engram.
Yeah.
So I think that will help a little bit there. So let's move on to our next guy.
All right, guys, so here we've got David Njoku. First things first, I want to recognize that he is still very young. I believe he's 22 years old. He might be 23 this season, but he is still, I believe, the youngest guy we've talked about so far, and so I absolutely love that. That's one of the things I wanted to address. He comes in the NFL as a big name, known for being athletic and talented, and he disappointed the first couple of seasons where people kind of expected a little more from him. Well, why do you think that is? One, he was super young. He didn't spend much time in college, and he was known as a bit of a project. He was a little rough around the edges, but extremely athletic. We expected that, and we predicted that, especially from a tight end position where rookies do not shine. I believe there have only been 4 rookie tight ends to ever have more than 500 yards receiving and 5 touchdowns. I don't know, for whatever reason that is, those numbers sound awful, but rookie tight ends, they just don't do it. There's so much to understand, from blocking schemes to your route tree and understanding the passing game, getting developed and being so versatile that you can be blocking defensive linemen but also outrunning linebackers and taking on cornerback coverages. There's just so much to do there. It's such a difficult position. And so we expected that struggle from David Njoku, and yet he's really starting to take off. So as you guys know, many of you guys know, Baker Mayfield played or started just 13 games last season. And in those 13 games, David Njoku had 705 yards and 5 touchdowns on 58 catches. Those are great numbers. You do that over a full 16 games, those numbers get even better, and I like that. And then you take the fact that he was a rookie last year, you're going to get an even more refined and developed quarterback in Baker, and I absolutely love that. One of the things to note is it's crazy to see the Browns average just 20 points per game before Baker Mayfield took over. Baker Mayfield takes over, they go to 25 points per game they scored on average. They went from 26th in the NFL scoring to 11th in NFL scoring. With a rookie quarterback, mind you. Baker comes in his second year. He's even more refined. He's a better quarterback, and you add Odell Beckham Jr., a solid number one threat. I think this is a great situation for David Njoku to kind of fly under the radar a little bit from defenses, not have to take on so much pressure as Odell Beckham's going to be seeing triple coverage, double coverage all the time. I think it's a great pick. I love to see what he can do this year. He definitely does have a ceiling with that insane running game. Nick Chubb was phenomenal last season. Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham. So again, there's a ceiling, but there's also a high floor there, and I love to see what he's going to do this season.
Yeah, the addition of Odell Beckham, I think, hurt his targets, but then the departure of Duke Johnson helps quite a bit there. So, but yeah, I love David Njoku, who's got a lot of talent, very safe floor. I think his floor is solidified in the offseason. It did lower his ceiling quite a bit, but this guy, once again, very talented there. Hopefully this is the year the Browns can turn it around, right? So I think they're going to.
All right.
Next guy on our list is Eric Ebron. So the former first-round pick, 10th overall, had really disappointed him in 2018. The Lions move on from him. He lands in Indy and really appears to be the number 2 guy behind Doyle. But he really became a solid tight end play last year and surprised a lot of people as a career best, 66 catches, 750 yards, and 13 touchdowns. Had a very, very good year there. Now, I think a lot of people feel like those touchdowns are a fluke, but I believe that he can hit double-digit touchdowns again, and I'll tell you why. One, start with Andrew Luck. Okay, got to have the right quarterback, got to have the right system, okay? Andrew Luck, his last 4 years, has averaged 2.31 touchdowns per game. Over 16 games, that's 37 touchdowns per season, so the volume is there. Now, a lot of people would argue, well, he had a boost in production because Doyle was out, he missed 10 games, Doyle will be back, whatnot, okay? But I want you to consider this. Of Ebron's 13 touchdowns, 7 of those came in 6 games where he was on the field with Doyle. So in reality, it actually opened things up for him there. So yeah, maybe not as many targets, maybe not as many catches, but I definitely think this guy's going to be a major red zone target there. Last year he was 5th in NFL yards, 6th in catches. And if you go back over the past 5 or 6 years, you look at Andrew Luck, he targets his tight ends at a higher percentage than any other quarterback in the NFL. Another thing that I like about the situation here is you look at Ebron. He's been in the league 6 years, and yet he's still only 26 years old. He came in the league very young, so got a lot of experience, yet he's still young enough that he could grow and mature as a tight end, as a player there. He's got an excellent quarterback. I think it ups his value. It doesn't matter how talented you are if you don't have a good quarterback there. I do think that Doyle does lower his PPR value for certain. So when I look at Ebron, I think he holds higher value in standard leagues, but still a very good tight end play. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, one more thing to add to that is I think another reason that we can trust the touchdown production that he had last year is that he is really the red zone threat. I think there's some good weapons there in that offense. But T.Y. Hilton, he's a deep ball guy. He's a big playmaker. He's a speedster. He's a downfield guy. He's not a red zone threat. You also got rookie wide receiver Paris Campbell. I'm excited to see what Paris Campbell can do, but he's unproven, and we don't know whether or not he's going to be able to star as the red zone guy. Right now, the number 1 target for Andrew Luck in the red zone is Eric Ebron, and that's a huge reason I think that we can trust going forward that that sort of production is going to continue. Maybe not quite to that same extent, but at least very similar. All right, guys, so here we are, Vance McDonald. The first thing I want to say is we just talked about Eric Ebron, and there's a major drop-off. So everyone we've talked about until now, I think they're pretty good fantasy options, and we like them. But everyone from Vance McDonald on, guys, we want to clarify is there's a huge drop-off in talent, and at this point, wait late in your drafts. Any one of these guys you get is fine. You're going to stream or whatever. Doesn't matter. Make sure not to reach on these guys. If we accidentally try to hype them up too much, be careful for that. Don't try to reach on these guys. But anyways, Vance McDonald, we like this guy for a few reasons. He had 50 catches, 610 yards, and 4 touchdowns last year. He did that on 564 snaps and 72 targets. First thing to note, that is all career highs for Vance McDonald. So good for him. Seems like his really his career production is on the rise and is increasing, and that's good. And that's actually going to continue. We're probably going to see even more snaps and even more targets for this guy when you look at the fact that Jesse James is gone and Antonio Brown is gone. So the second tight end there, the backup tight end, and the #1 wide receiver there, they're gone. So there's a lot of targets to be wanted. Now the thing to note is that when you look into it, Pittsburgh Steelers offensive coordinator came out and said that he is never going to play an entire game and he's not going to see a massive increase in snaps. However, this is a guy who is not known. He is not known for being a great blocking tight end. He is a specific receiving tight end. And so what we're probably going to see, guys, is he's going to see a slight uptick in snaps on the field, but I think we're going to see a larger percentage of his time on the field is going to be him running routes and getting targets. And so I think we're going to see an increase in target percentage. And I think that's going to relate to a few more catches, a few more yards, maybe an extra touchdown or two, but nothing major.
Talk about overlooking people. Here's a guy that I almost forgot about. He missed all last year, but Delanie Walker. 2017, he was given number 7th rating among tight ends by Pro Football Focus. In 2015, he was 6th. This guy's been successful. He has a lot of good years there. Now, if we look at the Titans right now, they don't really have a stud wide receiver, at least not yet, although I think the addition of Humphries might add another, maybe I would call a safety valve for Mariota, or let me say Tannehill, because honestly, I'm not really sure if Marcus is going to keep that job all year, but we'll see how that goes. Look at his numbers between 2014 to 2017. He averaged 74 catches and 896 receiving yards per season. Very good numbers there. Now at 35, coming off an injury, it's really hard to imagine he's going to repeat his numbers from 2015 where he had 94 catches and 1,088 yards there. But I think he's in an offense that is tight end friendly. He's got rapport with Mariota, and I think he's a guy that can have a safe floor, and this guy could easily end with 65 catches, maybe 800 yards there, which is not really, really exciting, but I think it's a very solid play. He did score a touchdown in the preseason. I like that. He's been on the field. Looks like he's back to 100%, ready to roll. This guy's extremely competitive. He's worked really hard to get back into shape, and once again, I think he's a guy that has a lower ceiling, but a very safe floor. Don't forget Delanie Walker. A lot of people are forgetting about this guy who sat out last year because of the injury. Let's get to Austin Hooper here. Here's another guy that I think is got a very safe floor, but not very exciting. He hasn't exploded on the scene per se, like a lot of the young tight ends I have, but he's been showing constant improvement each year. So for me, he's reliable, but personally, I'm not real excited about him. I don't know how you feel about him. I don't know. Do you see a guy you're excited?
No, he's a guy who you're taking him for the safety factor, and you're taking him for the fact that you don't have to draft him high. Wait on this guy and feel comfortable, but even then, maybe just stream, and that's really what I got to earlier with the Vance McDonald thing. At that point, are you just going to stream at your tight end position anyways? You probably pretty much are, aren't you?
Yeah, and I think a lot depends upon who's out there. Obviously, you have to be flexible in your drafts. We talked about draft strategies in one of our videos. You know, obviously, if there's still good quality running backs and wide receivers you can put on your bench that are important for you, we always talk about building your bench. Bench depth is important, and we build it specifically in your wide receivers and your running backs. We don't know about quarterbacks, tight ends, things like that. So, but if nobody else is out there and you feel like, yeah, you can go for this guy, but if there's solid plays in the other position, I would grab him. Third season, he improved his catches, targets, TDs, and yards last year. He finished with 71 catches, 660 yards, and 4 touchdowns. I think he's a guy that really holds more value in PPR leagues. Now, last year, it was 71 catches. That left him 4th in the league among tight ends, and he made the Pro Bowl, which, you know, had huge props to him. Pro Bowl, I mean, obviously, he's a very good tight end there. Now, if you look at this guy, if you study who he is, coming out of the combine, out of college, who he is, his yards after catch are lower because he's got good hands, but he doesn't have great speed. But his hands are really, really good. He had an 81% catch rate last year. That's 3rd among tight ends. Now, if you look at the type of play that he has, really, for me, his play and his ceiling are very, what I would call similar to Kyle Rudolph. He has a safe floor, but somewhat limited ceiling in terms of like raw talent. Now, as far as among the tight ends go, he was 2nd lowest drop percentage. We mentioned that he was 2nd highest catch percentage, so he's got very reliable hands there. I think another thing for me that I like, something that's going to stabilize his value and give him a safe floor, is that he's not going to draw a lot of attention. You got Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, Freeman at running back. Defenses aren't going to worry a whole lot about Austin Hooper. Let's just be honest, right? Like if you're the defensive coordinator, you're not losing sleep over Austin Hooper when you're preparing for the Falcons. Another thing I like, he's got a good quarterback in Matt Ryan. So I think everything's there to keep his floor very safe. I think one more thing that plays in the favors is coach and the scheme. So you look at Coach Cotter's style of play, and what I think a lot of people assume is going to continue being the pattern for them. As an offensive coordinator, at least the approach that they take to the game there, I think he'll thrive as a pass-catching tight end. You look back historically, under his coaching, a lot of tight ends have thrived. Came in great, had 80 targets for Tampa Bay in 2016. Mercedes Lewis had 81 targets for Jacksonville in 2011. And then Tony Gonzalez, of course, he's Tony Gonzalez. Obviously, he's got that talent. So it's kind of maybe unfair to make this comparison. But when Tony Gonzalez was underneath him as a coach, he really thrived from 2012 to 2013 when Gonzalez averaged 88 receptions, 895 yards, and 8 touchdowns with 122 targets per season. That's what he averaged. So very good numbers there. Another thing that's been good is you look at last year, Hooper in the offseason spent time with Matt Ryan working out privately, and I think we saw how that worked itself out. Well, he did the same thing this last year there. So I think everything points to him being a very safe pick, not real high ceiling, very safe floor. But like I said, miss anything you want to add to that? I've been saying that a lot lately, but feel free to add to that.
Feel free to add to that. Yeah,
it's like a catchphrase.
It's like we're gonna get T-shirts. Feel free to add to that. But it's one of those things where at this point, and I said it again, I said it before, and I'm gonna beat a dead horse and say it again. At this point, I'm so unexcited by these guys. I'm going to stream, and you guys know my philosophy. If you've ever watched us before, I'm going to take a tight end early. It's what I do. It's who I am. It fits the philosophy. The numbers support it. And so I don't often find myself getting this late at the tight end position. If I am, I'm going to take a shot on a guy with maybe a little bit of a higher ceiling. And maybe that's me. Maybe that philosophy is wrong. Whatever. That's where I'm at this point. All right, so here we've got Jordan Reed. Jordan Reed is not a great tight end. He's here because of the years he's had in the past. He's here because of his talent and the upside that he has shown. But there's a lot to not like about this guy. He's got an awful quarterback situation. The Vikings didn't want Case Keenum, then the Broncos didn't want Case Keenum, and now the Redskins are stuck with Case Keenum. That or they're going to play their rookie quarterback who is unproven, and we do not know what Haskins can do. So he's got a bad quarterback situation. He's played 6 years in the NFL, and not once has he played an entire season without getting hurt. Not a single year. For whatever reason, this guy has been absolutely marred by injuries, and there's absolutely no sign that the injuries are going to slow down. And furthermore, the injuries have not just been injuries, but they've shown that they are going to stop him from getting fantasy numbers. He has 4 touchdowns in the last 2 years combined. That's just 2 touchdowns each of the last 2 years. Jordan Reed is in this spot because, like we said, you're going to probably just draft for upside, and I think that he's worth the risk, and worst thing that happens, you drop him and pick somebody else up. So that's why he comes in this spot here. But it's really all upside. There's a very, very low floor for this guy.
I drank the Jordan Reed Kool-Aid last year. I wasn't going to do it again this year. I just couldn't do it. He did have one spectacular season. I do think the guy's got raw talent potential, but everything seemed to be trending upwards last year. Best shape ever, prepared to go in the season, on and on and on. We broke down all these possible, but when it came right down to it, it just, how many years in a row before you realize you just can't trust this guy. So keep an eye on him. Maybe he starts off hot, maybe things fall into place, maybe rebounds to that one stud year that he had. But other than that, once again, this guy is fool's gold. So at least from what we've seen so far. Another guy that we have to talk about that I'm not really excited about, but you know what? He's got value if you use him the right way. And every guy we've talked about at this point, like I'm not excited about Austin Hooper, but all these guys used the right way in the right matchups and the right team, the right scenario, they're going to have value. I want to get a stud tight end in the top 3 to 5, but you know what? There could be that running tight ends or your guy could get hurt, and so you need to know these guys. I'm talking about Greg Olson. He's had a very good career. He had 3 consecutive years over 1,000 yards, and he looked poised for another 1,000-yard season in 2017, but then he injures himself, hurts his foot, comes back, gets re-injured, can't stay healthy. Last year, once again, had health issues. At age 34, I have a hard time seeing him staying healthy for a full season. I really think his best years are behind him there. I also have concerns because Cam Newton's shoulder. 2 shoulder surgeries. There's reports out of camp that some of the arm strength is not there. I don't know. It's hard to say. You never know what to believe from camp, but they're saying a little bit of arm strength is gone. Time will tell. His career's only averaged 4.75 touchdowns per season. He's never had double-digit touchdowns per season. So I think that's another thing that lowers his value. He was Cam's safety valve for years. We could trust that, but I think for now that role has firmly been given to anyone?
Christian McCaffrey.
Obviously, that's going to be your safety valve. Come on, let's be real. Now, we talked about Cam Newton's shoulder issues and how that might be a problem for him, might lower his value, but in some ways actually could play into Greg's favor. What I mean by that is, they want to protect the quarterback. He's taken a lot of hits. He's got shoulder issues. So they might run more conservative offense, shorter throws. So that could actually help a little bit, boost some of that value there. Now that the arm strength might be gone. I think there's some red flags with him. I think he still has value. Last season, he did have a stretch where he had 4 touchdowns in 5 weeks, so we saw a little bit there remind us what he can do when he's on the field and healthy. I think there's some numbers there, but he's not a player he was 4 years ago. He's got a floor and a ceiling that's lower. If you look at if he stays healthy, and that's a big if, 60 catches, 700 yards, maybe 6 touchdowns would be reasonable. But that's, once again, if he stays healthy. So let's see how he progresses. Let's see if he stays healthy. Let's watch the matchups. Not a bad play, but he's not a guy that I would want to trust starting every week.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of people who are just coming out and saying Greg Olson was a great tight end and he's going to continue to be a great tight end. And I would want to believe that, but there's the injury. And the injury is, of course, always a concern. It's even more of a concern for a guy who's 34 years old. I know there's always these jokes about older players who can't recover from injuries, but those jokes are also kind of based on truth. And so I think if he were 24 years old, I would expect a little quicker recovery, a little bit better numbers than I'm expecting him to recover this season. And so just a little bit more apprehension there. All right, so here we've got Jimmy Graham, guys. He goes from Seattle to Green Bay, and he gets an increase in his yards per catch, his yards per target, and his catching percentage, and yet all three of those metrics were still below average. He played awful his last year there in Seattle, other than he got quite a few touchdowns, but he goes to Green Bay, he increases some of his metrics, but still below average, and only manages 2 touchdowns there for the Packers. 2 touchdowns. That's awful.
Wait a second. No, wait. Everybody was so high on this guy last year.
He plays for Green Bay. Yes. He has to do great.
He's going to be. We weren't. We told you guys last year to stay away from him, by the way. If you look at our rankings, everything that turned out, we talked about in our videos. But continue.
And part of that is Jimmy Graham is older. He's slower. He's not as fast as he was. He's just struggling. He's aging. But he's also getting less targets. Guys, Green Bay, they just don't target their tight ends. Aaron Rodgers, he's not a big tight end guy. He just isn't. I don't know what the scheme fit is, the X's and O's, the coaching staff, how they all break that down and why that is the way it is, but it is the way it is, and it's been that way for years. He got less targets last year than he basically ever has in his career. Guys, Jimmy Graham is a guy to avoid drafting too high. I just don't think he's going to be able to recover from that season. I think we're going to see a very similar season, except, well, I expect to see a few more than 2 touchdowns, 3 or 4, but definitely not a great option this year. It's just that system and that scheme and the fact that he's a little bit older, not quite as fast as he used to be.
So another guy who was really hyped last year, he's really the darling sleeper by many people there. But we actually didn't have him ranked that high. I personally didn't have him a sleeper, and you personally didn't have him a sleeper, and that's Trey Burton. I think what a lot of people saw is the money that they threw at him. They saw Nagy coming in the offenses. They thought about Kelce, and it just had all these dreams of like this bust-out season. And he really had a very average season. In fact, he struggled down the stretch. The last 7 games, you look at his stats per game. His last 7 games, he averaged 3 catches per game and 23 yards per game with only 1 touchdown that entire 7 games. Not good at all. I do think there's some signs of hope. One, Mitch Trubisky's improving. I also think Nagy's going to continue to improve that offense. They came from 29th in the NFL, and then he took over, brought them to 9th. So I think the offense is better. I think a better running game will open things up for him there. And when thrown to, his quarterback rating when the ball was thrown to him was 112, which is pretty solid. So I think things could still come together for this guy. Things could blow up based on everything that a lot of people thought last year could really come to fruition, but we need to see some things first before we trust him. And so keep your eye on this guy, but don't draft him. Expect him to be a starter for you. Just kind of click your watch list. A lot of you go on sites where you can click on your watch list. That's probably what I would do, unless you're in a really, really deep league. And what's a deep as 16? Even then, I still would not start this guy, at least not at first.
Well, that's what I'm pushing for. 16-team leagues. Guys, I want to start a 32-team league. What do you think?
That sounds quite boring.
That sounds awful. But yeah, I completely agree with you. Unless you're in a deep league, this guy shouldn't be drafted. All right, so here we have Kyle Rudolph. Now, we are huge Vikings fans. But some of you guys, I want to slap you upside the head. Why do I keep hearing news year after year about how great Kyle Rudolph is? This is absurd. I don't understand it. I saw an article last season that argued he was one of the top 5 tight ends in the NFL. I don't know where people are getting this from. The numbers aren't there. The X's and O's aren't there on the field, the film, the tape. Nothing is there. I don't know where people are getting this from. Do you have any idea?
Yeah, I mean, one could argue that maybe his football value is higher than his fantasy value. But even if you look at it, like I said, he's known to have great hands. Maybe a quality blocking tight end, but not great. Once again, this guy has been overhyped. We said that last year. We'll say it again. But give us the numbers so you know it's just not an opinion. Once again, we love the Vikings. And I like Kyle Rudolph, by the way. I just don't like him as a fantasy player at all.
He's just a very average par tight end. If you look over his entire career and average his seasons out, his average season consists of just 48 catches for 473 yards and 5 touchdowns. That's an average year for Kyle Rudolph. and that is a below average fantasy tight end for you. You look at last year, he had over 600 yards and 4 touchdowns. That looks like a pretty good season. Well, he had one monster game with 2 touchdowns and over 120 yards. If you take that out, he had just 500 yards and 2 touchdowns, which is a little bit more yards than his season average, but only 2 touchdowns. The production is not there, and it concerns me that his numbers were low again with Kirk Cousins. I thought that maybe last season a new quarterback would breathe some new life into his career and get him some more red zone targets, but it doesn't look like Kirk Cousins is exactly the sort of guy who's going to want to throw to his tight end as much as other quarterbacks in the league, and so we got to keep Kyle Rudolph here. For whatever reason, he's overhyped, but guys, look at the numbers.
So you talked about finding guys with high upside. Why take a chance on a Kyle Rudolph, who I think is an average tight end at best? I'd rather trust a guy like Chris Herndon. I think this guy's got a lot of potential. Last year, received the 7th best tight end ranking with Pro Football Focus. And you know what? Everything was really stacked against him last year. A rookie quarterback turned a rookie tight end, but he had actually a really nice season. Surprised a lot of people. He showed some upside. At times showed he could dominate. Now he is facing a 4-game suspension this year. It goes back to back in June of 2018. He was involved in a 2-car crash or was drinking, so he's going to face a 4-game suspension there. This guy's got good dynasty value. He's a good sleeper. Don't overlook this guy. I wouldn't draft him because I think, for me, I hate to waste a bench spot on a backup tight end, which is what you're going to do for the first 4 games, right? You can't start him, so I would never waste a bench spot on that. But I'd definitely come about week 3 or 4. If you're desperate for a tight end, he's a guy that you may want to grab there because I think he's got a lot of potential.
Absolutely. All right, here's another guy with huge potential, Mark Andrews. He's a guy we've got on our sleeper, on our watch list. We like this guy. At 6'4", 256 pounds, he is 23 years old. He's got good size. He is young. He's coming off of a good rookie season in which he had 34 receptions for over 552 yards and 3 touchdowns, not to mention a solid 28 first down receptions and an insane 16.2 yards per catch. It's clear that he is a playmaker. And in fact, among all tight ends in the NFL, he generated the best passer rating among all tight ends. He generated a passer rating of 129. That number is absolutely insane, especially when you consider he had Flacco and Lamar Jackson throwing him the ball last season. So that's the other point I want to make. Guys, Lamar Jackson was brutal last season. What he was able to do with such a terrible quarterback is shocking. And so it's nice to see that he was able to do that, and I'd love to see if Lamar Jackson can improve, if he can really develop and become more of a traditional NFL quarterback and be a little bit more successful, that's going to mean huge things for Mark Andrews. Now, the only thing to look at is that Hayden Hurst was a first-round pick drafted last year as well. He looked okay. Of course, he got injured, but that is a bit of a tight end position where we're a little bit concerned with the competition there. But if Mark Andrews does prove himself to be the guy, and Lamar Jackson shows himself to improve and develop more as a quarterback, Andrews could be a bit of a sleeper. This is a guy I'm definitely watching but not drafting.
Yeah, I really like Mark Andrews. I think there's a lot there. I think he was very impressive last year. Like you said, the biggest one is they didn't waste an early pick on Hayden Hurst just to bench him. So we're going to have to see how this plays itself out. But watch a few games. Mark Andrews could definitely move into that top 15 to 12 to 15 range for tight ends. Dallas Goadert, I love this guy. I'll tell you what, right now, if something would happen to Zach Ertz, he'd be an injury. This guy would immediately move into the top 10 as far as I'm concerned. I think he's got a lot of talent, a lot of potential, and he came out of college highly touted. Unfortunately, stuck behind Zach Ertz, who's a very good tight end there. Now, it's really hard to sustain 2 tight ends or production for 2 tight ends in one offense, right? It's hard to do, but it has been done before. Recently, in fact, if you think about Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez. So I think there is potential there, but I think his ceiling is lower. He has tight end 1 talent, but is stuck behind Zach Ertz. But watch this guy. In fact, I won't be surprised as he develops that either in the offseason one of those guys moves on to make room. They get a draft pick for him or Zach Ertz. Who knows? But like I said, Dallas Goadert is the real deal. So
absolutely. All right, guys, so here we have Jack Doyle. Now, the tight end position is not one where you're going to draft a guy who's already not the number 1 tight end, but if you were, it'd be Jack Doyle. This guy's got a lot of potential, as you mentioned earlier. Andrew Luck targets his tight ends more than any other quarterback in the league and has a super, super high touchdown per game rate. If anything happens to Eric Ebron, Jack Doyle becomes fantasy relevant, and he is worth picking up. So he's much like we talked about with Mark Andrews and with some other guys. Keep your eye on him, pay attention. They always say early bird gets the worm. Be ready to snatch these guys in free agency if anything happens.
Jason Witten, probably a better football story than a fantasy story. At age 37, he was already declining before he took a year off, and now he's going to come back a year later. Who knows? I do think you have a little bit of value. You're going to have to watch him. Here's where you're going to find value for him in fantasy. He's going to be value in PPR leagues as a plug-and-play in larger leagues based on matchups. That's it. So
that is the most oddly specific way to tell a player that he doesn't have much value. All right, guys, so here we have Jaylen Samuels. At 22 years old, this guy has more upside than most of the guys we've been talking about and more upside than everybody after him. This guy could be huge. With Jesse James gone and Antonio Brown gone, there's certainly room for a role. And you were talking about this earlier, so I wanted maybe if you would be willing to say what we were talking about earlier, which is this weird situation of does he even qualify as a tight end?
Yeah, in a lot of leagues. Last year as a rookie, he actually qualified as a running back and tight end in many leagues there. He doesn't in most leagues now, but there's also been a lot of talk, especially when he came in the league, that they might use him at tight end. So, right now he doesn't qualify, but it wouldn't take too many times for a lineup at that position that he would suddenly qualify again for it and be a great pick.
Boom. That's really all we got to say there. Watch that. Pay attention to your league. I know that in Yahoo, ESPN, NFL, a lot of different sites will qualify him differently. So just because your buddy Joe Schmo says he doesn't qualify doesn't mean he doesn't qualify in your league. So pay attention to that. And he may start the season not qualifying, and then the Pittsburgh could move him, and then he could qualify. And if he does qualify as a tight end, he's definitely worth a spot. Maybe even a little bit higher than where he is now. Not much, but he does have super, super high potential. More potential than a lot of other guys on this list.
He's a great bench stash because you're not wasting a tight end bench spot because he's also a guy that could become running back if something happened to James Conner or if he's ineffective. So great bench stash. I don't think you're wasting a spot with him. So. Ben Watson there, age 38. This guy's not young anymore. He's going to suspension, but I tell you what, he does have value. When he does come back, he'll be an offense that's built heavily for tight ends, and right now all the tight ends that bring it in, none of them are really working out. So you'd wait. You're not going to start this guy. You're not going to draft him be your tight end all year long, but he's a guy that will have some value for you. And we're going to get to our next one here. For some of you might argue like why, but I think you'll explain why.
All right, so guys, we got Rob Gronkowski. Now, before one of you smart Alex drops in the comments below, he's not even playing, because yeah, it happens every video. Somebody says something stupid like that. We know that. However, there's reports that this guy might kind of unretire. He might come back and play football, and I give that maybe 20-25% chance of happening. This guy is an athletic freak. He loves being in the weight room. He loves football. I don't think this guy's ready to retire. I think he was forced to retire due to injury issues which slowed his production. But I tell you what, the second he feels healthy, I bet you he comes back for another season or two. And if he does, well, he's worth a lot higher spot than this. Of course, this is like I mentioned earlier. Keep your eyes open, strike early. Strike hard, strike fast, no mercy. I don't even know what to say at this point. Just be ready if this guy unretires.
A Karate Kid
That
quote.
is a Karate Kid quote. It has nothing to do with this, but
you look at Robert Gronkowski. I think he's 31, 32. He's still young. He's got some years ahead of him there. One of the greatest tight ends ever played the game. A lot of reports out there, speculation that he's going to come back at some point this year, maybe next year. But I tell you what, is he worth a bench spot? I tell you what, it might be. If you're just brutally stuck with a bad tight end, wouldn't you rather stash Gronk and just maybe he comes back rather than just rolling week-to-week tight ends that stink?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if you're in a 16-team league, you might have Jordan Reed as your starter.
Yeah.
In which case, this is a big upgrade.
Yeah. Now, I will say this. Some of you will like that idea. I'm not going to do that because I'm not going to waste the bench spot for backup tight end. But for some of you, you will want to take that shot.
Especially if you have a deeper bench. We run usually pretty shallow benches because we love to keep the waiver wire rotating.
So, all right, we'd love to hear your comments. Subscribe, like, hit notification bar, share with your friends. Football season's getting right around the corner. Watch 2 days from now. We're going to release our Risers and Fallers video. What we've been seeing trends, what we see happening. We're really excited to do that one. Thanks for joining us. God bless and take care.